I'm delighted to have with me today Fahad Ifaz from iFarmer. Welcome.
Thank you, Raphael. Thank you for having me in the show.
It's my pleasure. And, you've actually been on my radar for quite a while because as an investor, I was lucky enough to catch one of your decks in your previous funding round, actually. and then the next time I saw you was on a conference call and I was staggered by your growth. So I figured this would be a really interesting chat to have and share with listeners because you've really accelerated over the last year or two, haven't you, as a company?
Yeah, I think we have, but I also feel that we have just started, and there is a long way to go.
I think that's how entrepreneurship always feels. But so before we dig into exactly what iFarmer is, tell us a bit about your background, where you came from, your education, and sort of your early career experiences.
Sure. So I was born in Bangladesh, in the capital, Dhaka, which is probably one of the most populous city in the world. And yes, I my schooling, my university, everything happened in Dhaka. I went to one of the most reputed private universities in Bangladesh. I enrolled in business with international business as my major, but then for some reason I still don't know why I got attracted to economics. So I did a dual major in international business and economics. But I think it was during the university days that I really got I think I got, bitten by the entrepreneurial bug during my university days because I joined a club which is called the Young Entrepreneur Society. I joined as a junior member and I ended up being the president of the club. And during those 3-4 years of the club, as you can imagine, it's called Entrepreneur Society. So there's a lot of interaction with entrepreneurs, people from the private sector, people from policymakers, or the whole policymaking industry and everything. But everything was around how can we foster entrepreneurship in Bangladesh. And yeah, I think that sort of I think encouraged me. But I probably did not realize that I want to become an entrepreneur right out of university because I grew up in a middle-class family in Bangladesh where entrepreneurship was, I think right now the situation has changed, but back then I'm talking about 2010, entrepreneurship was not really a thing. Like, a girl or a guy would just walk up to their parents and say, I want to, start a company, or I want to have a startup and stuff like that. It was not really normal. People would expect you to work for a bank or, a large multinational. Those sort of stuff were really common. And I went that way as well. Like, I followed the herd. And I ended up, interviewing for a multinational bank, and I think I worked there for about a week, and I realized that is not my thing. How hard I try, I can never be a banker.
So you had your epiphany early. You didn't wait for 10 years or 20 years in banking to realize it wasn't for you. Was there something particular that turned you off about that internship
It was like a proper job. It's not even an internship. So
right.
And I think it was the culture, the very formal. Everyone's like dressed up in their suits and ties and everything. And then I was like, and probably it was because I was in university. And the next thing I know is I'm sitting in this large office in a bank, and I probably still had my student hat on. I could not take all these formalities and the culture and everything. I thought I want something much more relaxed. And the second thing was it felt like everyone's like on their own, and even though I spent only a week, but it felt like everyone's on their own, and the collective vision is to make more money, but we don't know why we're making so much money. So yeah, I think I was just a young kid fresh out of university having all these weird thoughts, and I just realized this is not for me.
Well, if any banks are listening, they're going to have to work on their talent policies, how they're going to keep and attract the best talent moving forward. But you opted for something else then. which way did you go?
Right. So interestingly, I started working for an NGO, which was a Swiss NGO, and one of their, I think it was one of the first projects in the world which had the mandate to work with private sector to help the private sector design and develop products and services for the bottom of the pyramid or the poor population that they target. And this was a very fresh approach because traditionally NGOs were handing out stuff, right?
Yeah.
So this project had a very interesting approach that we will not hand out stuff. We will work with the private sector to help them design products and services, which creates a win-win. They can generate revenue from this while the target population can get access to these certain services and products. And yeah, so I think that sort of attracted me again, given that my background in the university, I was working with the in the entrepreneurs society and working and talking with entrepreneurs. That sort of registered with me this idea of, well, let's work with entrepreneurs and help them design new products and services. And on top of that, I think one of the other things that attracted me to this was because this was a national project, so they would work all over Bangladesh. And on the first day of the interview, my boss back then, who was taking the interview, he basically said, "Are you willing to travel all across the country?" And I was like, yes, that is what I want. So yeah, I think these couple of things probably sort of encouraged me to work in NGO, but also I also had to when I told this to my friends, to my faculty members, honestly speaking, no one really took it positively because they're like, you're a business graduate, you're not joining a private company, you're basically joining an NGO, and
yeah.
That does not look like, a good prospect for your career, for everything else.
So you felt there was a stigma at the time around NGOs because they're just seen as loss-making entities rather than the bank, right, which is all about maximizing profit. You felt that pressure around you?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of pressure from everyone because there is this thing that if you're not really bright enough to join the MNCs or the local conglomerates, banks and stuff. So that's why you ended up in an NGO where you really don't have to do much other than handing outs and providing handouts to people.
And is that what you felt the experience was like in reality?
No, not even close to that, because I think the experience was, I think I learned so much, which I wouldn't have learned if honestly speaking, now that I look back, I think I wouldn't have learned all this stuff. I wouldn't have interacted with so many people. So Bangladesh has about 65 districts. I traveled and worked in almost 48 districts. And meeting people from all layers, from farmers to laborers to small shop owner to one of the largest owner of a agri processing company or a farm mechanization company. It was just all these different experiences and so many different perspectives. I think I learned a lot, and right now whatever I'm doing, I think all this thing that I've learned is sort of coming back. And I can feel that some of these missing pieces of the puzzles, falling into their places.
So you traveled a lot. I see that it wasn't just Bangladesh either, and your career wasn't just one NGO in the end. You've worked for several, so a decade or so in that space.
Yeah, so I think my first job, which was with the Swiss NGO, worked mostly with the private sector partners, the value chain actors, and more so people on the ground, right? But then I realized that a lot of things in a country like Bangladesh does not change because of or needs to change, but it's not the people on the ground who have the authority to make those changes. You need to work with the policymakers. So I jumped ship. I started working for the World Bank, particularly with IFC on their South Asia business advisory team, and the whole the whole mandate of that team was to work with policymakers, change the laws, or work with policymakers to make a more conducive environment for businesses to thrive, which gave me a different level of exposure now that I got to work with, the ministers and the bureaucrats and people on that side of the table who makes the policies and the laws and everything else. And that was in itself an interesting experience as well. During my work there, of course, I got a lot of exposure. But right after, I think right after IFC, so I started doing consulting work because again, I felt that seems like a bit more exciting because there are a lot of NGOs and projects who wants people to come and support them. And my expertise was actually helping these NGOs or these donor-funded projects to work with market actors. And the definition of market actors was not just the private sector, but also the policymakers and the enablers of the market as well.
Yeah.
And that took me to places. I worked in Myanmar, India, Thailand, spent some time in Nigeria. And then right before I jumped onto my final act of entrepreneurship that I'm currently on, I worked almost for 3 years in Myanmar. Where I was leading a multi-million-dollar project with CARE International. And the project was entirely focused on increasing the capability of smallholder farmers, providing access to finance, access to market, and all this stuff.
Wow. So I mean, that's obviously direct, very relevant experience. Would you say Myanmar is a similar market to Bangladesh, or very different?
I think it's very different, although we're neighbors, but it's very different given that Bangladesh has a population of about 170 million people versus Myanmar's around 50 to 60 million. And the country is almost 4, I think it's about 4 or 5 times bigger than Bangladesh. It was a very different context and the situation was very different. On the other side, Bangladesh, I think the economy of Bangladesh is much more competitive. There's so many players in the market and they're competing. So there's everyone wants to do well than their competition. Versus Myanmar, I think the market, again, given their economic situation and everything else, the political and economic situation, Myanmar was not so competitive, I want to say. So yeah, it was the context were very different.
So the essence of what you saw in Myanmar with your work at that time, is that where you first realized there was a funding gap for farmers or in agriculture in general?
That was the final. I think that was the final step that I had to take. But I think my exposure to this started right after university when I joined that first NGO. But back then, I think I was too young to formulate this, to understand this, like what is happening. And one thing I learned throughout this journey, which is a very important lesson for me, I feel, is that most cases when we look at a problem, we mostly look at the symptom, right? And most solutions are designed around that symptom. But there are very few solutions which are designed to resolve the underlying causes. And that is something I think it took me like almost 10 years to understand this, that it's but yeah, the exposure to these farmers not getting access to finance, farmers not getting access to market, they're not buying good quality input and stuff. I was exposed to this, but I was not really understanding like why are they not getting all these services? There's so much money coming in from the international development space. There's government subsidy. There are the private sector companies. Then yeah, why do we keep seeing that farmers are still not getting these services and they're not thriving where they should be, because they are technically feeding 160 million people in a country like ours. I think the exposure to these problems started really early. And then I think I got a bit more confidence because at first I thought maybe it's just a Bangladesh problem. But then I when I worked around a bit, I thought, no, it's not only a Bangladesh problem. It seems like it's a problem everywhere that I've worked on. And then gradually, probably I was able to understand a bit more. I don't claim I understand it completely because it is a very complex system, but I think I got a bit more confident to know, okay, where should you at least try to start to solve these problems?
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs get maybe some expertise in a particular technology or excited about a technology or a specific approach, and then it's easy to kind of generate a solution that's looking for a problem in a way. But it seems like your decade of experience is really, helping you interact with the different actors and participants in the value chain, etc., to really understand the interrelated nature of the different participants and thereby start to construct a solution that could make sense to them. But how did you make the jump? Did you quit the NGO saying, I know I'm going to build iFarmer, or did you start an MVP, or how did that transition happen?
So I quit. I think I had the courage to quit when I found a couple of the partners who wanted to join with me, and the first person that jumped ship was one of my friends who's currently he's the CEO and the co-founder, another co-founder of iFarmer, Jamil. Him and I, we go way back from university, like almost 15-20 years of friendship, and he comes from a technology background, so we always talked about this but never really had the idea of what we really wanted to do. But I think he was the first one who said, this seems like a big problem, let's try and do something. And the first thing we did was also not iFarmer. So iFarmer was sort of like a side project. The first thing we did, both of us, was to start a tech company, which started because we needed revenue. We wanted to start earning as well. So we started a tech company along with two others. So there's just four of us who started this company called Misfit Technologies, which was more of a dev shop that would develop apps and websites and softwares for clients. The whole idea was that we want to build and work on iFarmer, but to build this, we need money. And to generate the money, we started selling softwares and apps and websites to Misfit. And whatever we were getting, we're putting into iFarmer and a couple of other projects. So that's how we started in 2018. And the first version of iFarmer was also an entirely different project. We were trying to do rooftop urban farming on people's rooftop. And I still don't know why that was the first idea that we got so stuck on, because my experience, it just, now that I look back, it just logically does not make sense, because I had no idea about urban farming. I had more idea about actual farmers doing the farming, and I can't remember how we just got into that idea that, okay, let's start rooftop farming. We tried that for 6 months, and then we realized that is not a really scalable model, at least not for this country. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't make sense when you have about 20 million farmers who are much more experienced with regards to, producing food. So after trying that for 6 months, we then shifted towards the model that we're currently on, where we directly work with the actual farmers.
The rooftop thing, that's quite interesting. We're seeing car parks turned into vertical farms and stuff here in Singapore. So it can be a great solution, but not necessarily in the right location. Right. What was the reason? Did you think at that time you needed to really completely innovate and be like category defining or like create almost alchemy from nothing? Or what do you think was making you want to go with an urban solution when you have so much rural experience? So
I think a couple of things, but I think the most important one, and now that I look back, and I think I am almost embarrassed to even admit this, is the fact that it seemed like an idea that potential investors would like, and it felt like, oh yeah, that's the thing. Like if we start this and we start pitching this, money will start flowing, coming in. That was the first thought. the second one was also that, look, I think because most of us, even though I have had the most exposure to working in rural areas, but again, I grew up in the city, right? My family, everything is in, they lived in the city. What you call like a zone of influence, right? So probably all of us felt, including myself, that it's much more easy to operate, right, within the city because we live here, we know how the city works, and we know people, networks, and blah blah blah. Versus, like the whole operations and everything of running things in rural areas, we just probably thought it was too much. So I think this was two of the most important reasons. I think we wanted to attract investment, and we thought this model sounds like an investable idea to pitch.
Yeah.
Because back then, I don't think agri-tech as a category was not really popular, not even in India, where you already had a lot of e-commerce and everything in 2017-18. Even in 2017-18, agri-tech probably was not a vertical that would get a lot of exposure from the VCs or the investors as it gets now.
Yeah, and I don't think you should be embarrassed by those comments, to be honest, because I think fundraising is just so hard, and I think often underestimated just how hard it is, even for fast-growing, VC backable companies. Is still very tough. So I can completely understand wanting a solution that would attract capital. And as for the biases, I think we're all kind of guilty of wanting to build a business that's kind of acknowledged or seen on our doorstep, and the same goes for investors. So I know several examples where investors have persuaded companies to expand into a geography that they were based in, because honestly, probably they wanted to be able to see the logo and say, I've backed this thing, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right next market to go into. Yeah. So these humans are always human. We're going to keep making these mistakes because we are a little bit prone to ego. So you kind of plowed sort of 6 months into this, but at the same time you kind of you had iFarmer in the back of your mind, at least, I guess, ready to translate into what it's becoming now.
Yeah. So during those 6 months, we tried different stuff on the urban rooftop farming. And I think it was during those 6 months, the current model of iFarmer was also sort of formulating, because I felt like this is not, the urban rooftop farming is not going to happen and stuff. Then there's one particular day, probably I just felt that we need to rethink, because it was like, in Dhaka city, most people, they live in apartments, and no one really knows who owns the rooftop or who has the authority to do anything on the rooftop. Everyone has their own apartment, they own the apartment. The rooftop seems to be like not a clear understanding of what is possible in that space or not. And we literally got kicked out of an apartment building because one person, he gave us the permission to go and set up the farms in the rooftop. The next guy comes in and says, "Who gave you the permission? Just get out of the apartment building." And I felt like that is it. This is it. This thing is not going to work. And I think I came back and went to the drawing board and start. I think the first thing I do is draw the whole agriculture value chain that I know of, and try to explain this to my team that this is where the food comes from. It does not come from people's rooftop. Mm-hmm. This is the whole system that feeds the country. But there are so many problems that I think we can solve. And I think after the end of the conversation, one of my team member, we were just a 4-person team, and one of the team member basically said, "But farmers will not be able to pay, so that probably we won't be able to make a lot of revenue, and that doesn't look good." And I'm like, there are about 20 million of them, so even if they pay whatever they can, and they will still make loads of money. But first of all, let's write down that assumption that you have, that farmers are not willing to pay or farmers are not able to pay, and let's go and test it out. So that's how we just graduated from urban rooftop farming company to work on that current model. So first thing we did was, four of us, we went to talk to farmers with these two assumptions: that if someone offers these solutions to the farmers, will that company earn revenue either from the farmer or from someone else? Like, what does it look like? So yeah, that's when I think that was the beginning of iFarmer as we know it in its current model.
Very cool. So for a moment, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about this market that you've understood so well in your travels around Bangladesh, because you mentioned there's 20 million farmers. That's an astonishing number of people, because the size of Bangladesh, as you already said, is very small. It's, I had a quick look. It's about the size of England and Wales for people in Europe. And for those in North America, it's about the size of the state of New York. So it's a pretty small area to have the population that you have, which is, what did you say, 170 now? Or
yes, it's 170.
170 million people. And, if you look at the size of the UK in terms of an equivalent, or at least England and Wales, not even Scotland and Northern Ireland, but just England and Wales combined, similar land mass, there's 100,000 farmers. In Bangladesh, you're talking about 20 million, right? So it's a completely different setup. It's hard for people to imagine, I guess, if you've passed, fields of corn or dairy or whatever, cows, they're huge things, farms run with tractors and everything. But I'm guessing it's just like way more smallholder farmers in Bangladesh, and they're producing mixed crops, for example, and in a lot higher density in lots of rural areas, and that must be a challenge for you guys, because it means that you have to be everywhere, right?
Yeah. So just to give you the context, of Bangladesh, about 20 million farmers. The average land size of these farmers are about 2 to 2.5 acres, right? So that's a pretty small land, and they're very densely populated, right? So the whole country is densely populated. So in a way, it's a challenge that you have to deal with so many, farmers versus having to deal with, a few thousand who controls a few thousand acres of land. But also, I think it also gives an opportunity, because just the number of potential customer is a lot, and it makes every sense to try to serve these large number of farmers. On the other hand, because it's a smaller country, right? So unlike let's say Indonesia or India, which are really large countries, for us it's much easier to get access to these farmers, because again they live in a very closely knitted farming communities, clusters and stuff like that. You don't have to really travel really far to meet your next farmer. You will meet him or her right next to the first farmer you met. So yeah, there are challenges and opportunities, and also with regards to the country's economy and the contribution of agriculture. Currently, the size of Bangladesh's GDP is about 420 billion, and agriculture contributes around 13 to 14%. Mm-hmm. And which was much higher. I think in 2010, this was almost about 40% contribution. But of course, over the years, Bangladesh has graduated and invested a lot in manufacturing and garments and all this stuff. So the relative, the percentage has come down, but the volume has not really come down with regards to agriculture. On the other thing we see is that a lot of farmers currently the average age of farmers in Bangladesh is about 40. Now, the challenge is that, and the question that I keep asking myself and my team and everyone else, that, look, this is not a country where we will suddenly see really large farms. So we'll have to depend on these smallholder farmers. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is that the next generation of these farmers who are currently active, like their children, their sons and daughters, are not really interested to get into farming. And the reason is that they've seen their parents struggle. They've seen how much they have to work around and, in the field from dawn to dusk. Even then, they're not getting the right price, the right market, not making enough money. The question is that, Bangladesh currently has 170 million people. It will have 240 million people by 2050.
Wow.
And the question is, who's going to feed this large number of people in the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, that's huge population growth. And, I read that agriculture accounted for 90% of the reduction of poverty in Bangladesh between 2005 to 2010. And if nobody wants to be farmers moving forward, then it could likely, potentially swing the other way. So is that something you're trying to address with the work that you're doing? Or is it just a kind of thing that you acknowledge and can't really have any influence over?
No, I think this is an underlying problem that we are also trying to solve of course we are trying different things here, because agriculture does not have to be, or farming does not have to be, a back-breaking job, right? There are ways to make it much easier, right? For example, farm mechanization is a thing, right? Which is not very heavily adopted in the country because most farmers don't have the capacity to invest in machines and stuff. Precision agriculture is also important because that helps you to reduce cost and then increases your ROI in the short to medium run as well. And these are the things, and overall, integrating technology. And these are the things the younger generation would be much more interested, because they want more things in life, right? So when I talk to these younger farmers in rural areas, they're like, look, we don't want to do farming the way our parents did, because they could live and spend the whole day in the field, but we want to do other things. We want to enjoy life as well.
Yeah.
So if there's farm mechanization, precision agriculture, and all these new technology that can help me to do the job in 2 hours compared to my parents who to do the same job about 8 to 10 hours, then yes, I will be interested. And then I also need a good return from my investment, right? I also want to be able to reach the market. I also want to be able to negotiate with the market and all this stuff. And then, yes, we will be interested because this land belongs to us. And if you're not doing anything, then, there's no utilization of the land. So yeah, the younger generation is interested, but it's also that they want things to be done in their own way. And iFarmer is trying to do that as well. We're slowly trying to integrate more technology. We're trying to integrate precision agriculture. We have just started working into farm mechanization. All of these to be able to attract the next generation of farmers to continue to work.
That's awesome. So tell us what iFarmer is today.
So iFarmer today is an agri-fintech company that provides or bundles financing with agriculture inputs, which is seed, fertilizer, pesticide, but quality inputs compared to non-quality fake products that are available in the market at a cheaper price. We offer advisory services, insurance, and access to market for the farmers, because as I said at the beginning, that most farmers are smallholder farmers. Almost 70% of the financing in agriculture comes from informal sources. And these informal sources are basically, local loan sharks or middlemen who pre-finance the farmers. The interest ranges from 20% to 60%. A lot of people ask me, what about microfinance? Because microfinance started from Bangladesh, and this is, a tool that has helped so many around the world. But the challenge with microfinance and agriculture is that microfinance was never really designed for agriculture. Because, for example, in the model of microfinance, you have to repay on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, smaller quantities, but you have to continuously pay back. The problem with agriculture is you will only get the money once you have harvested, which happens, let's say, in 4 to 6 months, even longer for certain products. And this lack of, which creates this opportunity for local, money lenders and loan sharks to offer financing to the farmers at a really high cost. And the reason we feel at iFarmer that this is the most critical thing is because that this high cost of money sort of stops the farmer from investing. He wants to play safe, right? He does not invest in better quality of inputs because maybe he just wants to do whatever he knows best. Does not really invest in mechanization and stuff like that, because again, if you're borrowed money from which is really expensive, you will probably try to play it safe and make sure you make enough to pay it back. And then because he has this pressure to pay back the money, when it comes to selling their product, right, farmers don't really get to negotiate because he's constantly under pressure to pay back that high cost capital.
Yeah.
So along with a few other things, like there's of course the infrastructure for storage and everything else. So he usually sells at whatever price he or she gets. So what happens is farmer takes their product, and these are small farmers with smaller quantities, right? So they also don't have the negotiation power. So a usual scenario would be farmer harvests, takes the product to the nearest market, to the local trader. The trader offers a price. Now the trader knows that the farmers will not take the product back home because it don't make sense for the farmer to take the product back home with all the transport cost and everything.
Yeah.
And yes, the farmer will try to negotiate, but end of the day, they will sell at whatever the price the traders are offering.
Yeah.
Some farmers might get really frustrated, and this is when you see in the news, if you follow some of these news around, especially in this part of the world, farmers throwing away their products or produce on the road just out of frustration.
Wow. Yeah, that's why you always want to be the last day of a car boot sale. But you're right. If you're going to have a negotiation, you want to be in a position of strength, and obviously you're not at that point. So iFarmer's kind of become a super app. I don't know if you define it, yourself, because you kind of have multiple problems that you're addressing, right, or multiple customers on it. But firstly, do you think it's that? And secondly, like, you started very much with the finance side, and then you opened up, these other problems or opportunities that you saw by being close to the farmers.
Right. So first of all, I don't think we don't see ourselves as a super app. What we think of ourselves as more of a one-stop solution for farmers, because these are smallholder farmers and they have to deal with different stakeholders, right? When they want financing, they have to go to one person. When they want to buy inputs, another person. When they want advisory, that's a different person. When they have to sell, that's another person. They don't have the capacity to do with so many people, and then also focus on their farming. So we were like, look, the idea that iFarmer has is that farmers don't have to deal with so many stakeholders. Rather, they get all these services under one platform or under one umbrella, which is iFarmer. And also because some of these services, I think, evolved. Like, for example, and also I think we saw the opportunity. Like, so we started with financing in 2019, but then the pandemic happened, and in 2020, I remember that we were looking at these numbers, and we saw that farmers are not able to pay back. And the reason was they were not able to sell their product because during the pandemic, there were lockdowns. People were not moving around. The local traders are not operating. So it was very difficult for the farmers to sell their produce. So we just started our supply chain business because we thought this is a great opportunity where farmers are really struggling, and we thought we can try and solve this. So that's when our output supply chain vertical started. Then all these businesses, I think, we could start, or all these verticals that we could start, it was also because we understood the market, the agriculture market. We understood the complexities around, and we were continuously learning and collecting feedbacks from the farmers. Like, for example, the input business where we distribute agriculture inputs also started when we started, getting feedback from the farmers that they were saying, yes, you finance us, but then, with that money, we still can't buy the best quality inputs because the nearest shop that we buy it from does not even have those inputs. So no matter, even if you give us financing, you give us advisory to buy the best quality inputs, but I don't have access to that input. With that insight, we started working on the inputs side of things. So I think this evolution of iFarmer from financing to output supply chain to input distribution to advisory, insurance, and all this stuff was not always predetermined. These are like, we saw the opportunity, but the opportunity came because we always had our ears and eyes on the ground to continuously observe and learn and understand what is happening on the ground and with the farmers.
So coming way back to when your colleague said, how's a farmer going to pay for this? You've found a few areas where you offer value, and you've obviously been able to monetize that relationship, right? So give our listeners an impression of how many farmers and financiers and things that, some metrics around what you've been doing.
Yes. So currently we work with 71,000 farmers till date. Since and even the 71,000 sometimes feels like scratching the surface because there's 20 million of them.
Yeah.
And till date, since starting in 2019, we have financed or facilitated about $25 million in farm financing. As I said, we have also expanded into the input and output side of things. On the output side, in July 2020, when we started that, right in the middle of the pandemic, we were moving about 50 tons of product, from the farmers to the buyers. Our buyers are mostly, processing companies, super shops, wholesale markets, those sort of, buyers. Currently, we do about 15,000 tons a month, right? So from 50 tons in July 2020 to June 2022, we're doing 15 tons a month. And and then going back to that revenue question, whether this was a good business to make money, our last year's revenue was $10 million, and this year, from Jan to June, we already clocked in a revenue of about $22 million.
Wow.
We still have the next 6 months as well. So, yeah.
I think you're going to be getting phone calls after this chat. So, I saw that, I think it was 1 or 2 years ago. I mean, not even 2. I reckon it was 18 months ago or something. I looked and you had 5,000 or something in the original thing that I received, right? 5,000 farmers and to 71. How do you go from 5,000 to 70,000 in a year or whatever? What changed for you? Did your tech change? Did you just add tons more people? What was the real catalyst?
So I think the real catalyst was, I think there are two things that happened. So A was back then when you saw the 5,000, we did not farmers, we did not have any tech. Because I think the first 1.5 years, we did not have any technology. We were just, as Paul Graham says, do things that don't scale. So we sort of probably believed in that a bit too much, probably. And we were literally doing things, but that helped us.
So hold on, let's for a second. Your first 100 farmers, tell us how because it sounds easy, right? You find people willing to finance stuff. You find people who need to borrow the money and are good for it and will pay you back. But these are people that probably are mostly unbanked or certainly, don't have access to lending and are probably seen as a high flight risk. Yes. So that first 100, tell us how that happened. How did you do it if you didn't have any tech?
So the first 100 farmers, we visited their house. So when I say we have field team, including in some of the visits I was there as well. My other team members, co-founders, we all sort of, would form a group, and we had a template for collecting the data, right? There were like questions like, what's your plan for next season? How much money do you need? What are your current sources of financing? What did you do last year? And then, trying to understand their agriculture the farming situation, their socioeconomic conditions and stuff like that. But this was like all done like manually. We would collect this we would go from house to house in a village and collect this information. And then end of the day, we'd sit together and analyze this information. What did we learn? What did we observe? And those sort of stuff. And then put it in an Excel file.
Right.
And then we would rank the farmers, like based on the information we have, based on our understanding, our gut feeling and everything else. We just rank the farmers this farmer scores the highest, and we can definitely finance him. This farmer has a really low score. Either we need to find more information, or we just say we can't work with this farmer at the moment. So it's all manual.
So you created basically a human credit engine of your team to do it. And where did the finance come from? Was that friends and families and fools, as they say?
Friends, families, and fools. To be honest. I think it was because people sort of trusted me and my co-founder and our team, and these are like friends and family, and they thought, they seem to understand what they're doing, and we'll just give them the money. And probably no one really expected us to return their money. They probably gave it us as a gift, but never really said that. But that's, I think, the first year, like 2019, all the financing came from friends and family, people that we know, but also we gave them a lot of data, all this manual data that we collected. We also shared with them all the data and stuff. But then I think from the middle of 2020 or early 2020, I would say, we started seeing like things happen organically. Like we'd receive a call from someone that, none of us knew this person. And he'd call us and said, okay, you're iFarmer. You help invest in farming and agriculture. I want to learn more. Can I visit your office? Yeah, sure. So I think it was like, from Q2 of 2020, we started observing a lot of organic growth.
Right.
And it was mostly through word of mouth, because we were still not advertising. We were still not we just had a Facebook page. That was it. We didn't even have a website.
And at this point, did you already have like one season worth of crops returned and
yes.
Payback, right? Like, did you have a big default? What was the first 50 or 100? What was like the average return?
The first 100, the average return to the investors was they received an annualized return of almost 25-30%.
What?
Of course, yeah, that's the first group of people, because we did not cut.
Yeah, you didn't take anything.
Yeah, we didn't take anything. We gave everything. So 70% of the profit went to the farmers, and about 30% went to the investors, and they were happy.
Wow.
More than happy, I'd say. And surprisingly, we did not have any default.
Zero defaults.
Zero defaults.
Right.
And one reason is because we really closely monitored these 100 farmers, right?
Yeah.
Because of our field team, and we knew that at scale that is not going to happen.
Okay.
But and I continue to say this and tell this to my team, that the vision of scaling up has to be there. Mm-hmm. But this is still day one, right? You still need solve the problem on day one. And today you don't have that scale. Today you have 10 customers. So we should try to give them the best experience they can have. And of course, we know that we'll not be able to give that 5-star experience when you have 10 million customers. But that is for the future to solve it and come up. But today you have 10 existing customers, and we have to give them the best experience.
And I assume you don't have a fully human credit engine anymore, because I downloaded your app, which allows me to kind of look and see at the different projects that you're doing, right, and potential returns. So when I say super app, you're kind of super in the sense that you're democratizing or making it easier to find funding sources to people who would have access to a smartphone. But I guess for your average farmer in rural Bangladesh, they're probably, they're not carrying iPhones, are they? So you have to have a solution that's fit for purpose. How have you solved that? I know you're like 140 people now, so are you trying to maintain that face-to-face as much as possible, or are you caught between a sort of, should we fully automate, or what's the right input mechanism to get these the demand from the farmer side?
So what we have done, and this has also helped us to some extent to go from 5,000 to 70,000 plus farmers, is so we still have that presence with our own team on the ground, but now they're not going from the farmer's house to house and collecting data. They're basically monitoring, facilitating. We call them field facilitators.
Okay.
And what we have is now we have a technology. Now farmers, we figured out that farmers, that most of their when they visit the agri input retail shop, very frequently, either to get advice or to buy inputs. But this is their go-to place. And we started partnering up with these input shops to turn them into our agents. Now what happens is the farmer comes into a shop and he sees iFarmer logo, what iFarmer does and everything, and he wants to apply for financing. At the moment he wants that, there's an app that the agent uses, and he can make the application within 10 to 15 minutes.
Cool.
Collecting, necessary data, the KYC. We are also connected to the government database to verify that person's, national ID and everything else. So now it happens within 15 minutes. When we did that first 100, each interview took us about 1.5 to 2 hours.
Yes.
So yeah, and this agent model helped us to scale faster. And yeah, I think that's what's we're trying to increase the number of agents to reach to more number of farmers, and our team continues to be there to observe, to learn, to facilitate these agents, to continue to work with the farmers, because again, farmers don't have smartphones, right? So they still need certain things that has to be done physically. Like for example, one thing that we do is we conduct frequently field trainings, right? So where we would invite 50 farmers to talk about potato farming, right?
Cool.
Or tomato farming and stuff like that. And in each training there could be 50 to 100 farmers, but then we do a few hundred trainings every week or month. And our field team facilitates this training and stuff like that. So yeah, I think this situation is as such that farmers still don't have access to a smartphone, but they do have access to a phone, right? And now we're also trying to take advantage of that. So we send them regular SMSs, we send them phone calls from our call center, which we have newly set up. Farmers can also call us and ask for suggestions or advisory services and stuff like that.
Yeah, you've got your feelers all over the place, and you're able to kind of process the demand, right? So, what's the vision for this? Are you gonna stick with Bangladesh, or because you've only just scratched the surface, as you said at the beginning, right? You feel like you're only just getting started, even though you've got 70,000 farmers, already on your platform. You're going after a market opportunity of 20 million, or do you want to take this into other countries as well as soon as possible? How do you see the vision?
So we wanted to deploy this in other countries as soon as we were confident that now we have the right technology and the right mix to replicate iFarmer in another location with similar context. But then COVID happened, and yeah, it was very difficult to do anything. And so we sort of refocused and said, well, let's focus on Bangladesh. So our target for now in Bangladesh is to reach 1 million farmers by 2025, and then beyond 2025, we would go back and look into those other countries that we identified. So which has similar context. We have some experience. On the top of the list is actually Myanmar, because I lived and worked there for so long. I understand the market systems there. But we're also looking at Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Laos, these countries with similar context, similar problems and challenges within the agriculture system.
Yeah, I mean, smart. Go for places where you have an understanding, because otherwise you're probably going to learn your lesson the expensive way. And, I really think it's a super interesting example for entrepreneurs, because I think investors all the time tell founders, just stick to one very specific problem. Don't try and solve multiple pain points in one go. And I actually quite like this work by Parker Conrad, who talks about compound startups. And that theory is around the deepest business problems are, often span multiple point solutions,
right,
rather than like a single point.
Right.
And I think iFarmer is a really good example of that. You start with something. I think it's good to have very good, strong focus, but actually there's so many adjacencies for you, because you've taken what is essentially an unattractive customer, or a customer that nobody else wants. I mean, maybe that's unfair. Like, I'm sure fertilizer companies and things want them as customers, but they're not seen as a high value, customer. But what's exciting is by helping with their biggest pain point around finance, you then see these adjacencies, and you see the other issues which are slowing down productivity or slowing down growth. Right. And you might just stumble on some of the bigger problems for Bangladesh and actually the world, in that we need to feed more and more people. If we don't have people who are passionate about farming, who want to grow crops, we're going to have a major problem. So, the way to really understand that is by being close to that audience, an audience that is basically unheard and not seen as being attractive. But you guys have kind of almost quietly, completely under the radar, got to know them really well. And that to me is extremely inspiring. And that's why I think, iFarmer has a very big opportunity, obviously, to go after. I just want to say congratulations, because I saw that you're going to be joining the Masters of Scale event in San Fran. Is that how did that happen? And are you excited?
Yes. So I think it was the first episode of Masters of Scale when they launched the podcast, and I'm a big fan of Reid Hoffman.
Yeah.
And I started listening to it from the very first episode, and then on one of the episodes they said, well, we're doing a summit and we're going to invite like around 30 to 40 early stage founders to join the summit for free. And I was like, yes, why not? Like, should definitely apply for it. I applied and got a positive response. And definitely looking forward to this event, because I think right now as a business, I think we've done the first step of a long journey. Mm-hmm. Which is to get to wherever we have built. We have a product market fit. Now the question is, how do you scale? Like, how do I go to 10 million farmers? How do I go to 20 million beyond Bangladesh and all this stuff? And I felt like that's my expectation, that I probably will get to interact and learn from people who have scaled. And of course, scaling up comes with its own challenges, requirements for resources and everything. And that's what I'm looking forward to, gaining that experience.
I think that will be very eye-opening. I've seen some of the speakers there. They're off the charts. They're like a hit list of everyone and anyone who's a billionaire or built in crazy big company. I think you're gonna put Bangladesh on the map there for sure. And I've really enjoyed this chat. I could talk for a lot longer on iFarmer and the opportunity. How do people get in touch? Is LinkedIn the best way, or I'm sure?
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, LinkedIn is definitely where I'm really active. And we just started having conversation to raise our Series A. So definitely open to having conversations around fundraise, but also other than fundraise, we are continuously looking to collaborate with technology, companies who has solved problems in this agriculture space. Like, we're talking to remote sensing companies. We're talking to companies who make and design, soil sensors and stuff like that. So
cool.
always open for that sort of collaboration. And yes, LinkedIn is probably the best way to get in touch. If you search Fahad Ifaz, it should show up.
Cool. I'll make sure it's in the show notes. So Fahad, this has been, fantastic. Thanks for taking us through your story, how far you've come, and how honest and open it was. And I think it's a real lesson as well in terms of not chasing the money, right? Like they say fall in love with the problem, and you were able to take kind of 10 years of experience and you toyed with the rooftop solution, but then you kind of had your moment when you went, hold on, I'm basically a global expert in this. And as soon as you did that, it's obviously flourished. And that's something that we can all kind of take away and learn from, is like, you don't have to force it. We don't have to raise too much money. You need enough to get going. But if you can create traction just through friends and family money and then add capital at the right time, you probably end up in the long run in a much better position than taking too much money too early when you haven't really got market fit yet. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I'll be tracking iFarmer for sure, and look forward to having you on the show when you're a unicorn.
Thanks a lot, Rafael, and I enjoyed the conversation. And also, it's always good. I think one important thing is that it's always good to remember why and how you started. And I think it was today when we were having this conversation. Usually these days you don't get a lot of time because you have to live in the present and look into the future. But this sort of opportunity is always a good thing to be able to look back and remember why and how you started. Thank you for that. And thank you for having me here.